Get ready for the most intense showdown you've ever heard. In this thrilling tale, a seemingly ordinary waitress named Melissa James squares off against the fearsome biker gang known as the Iron Cobras in the heart of Atlantic City. While serving cocktails at her casino job, Melissa faces an unexpected ambush. But little do these tough bikers know, she's armed with elite SWAT training. From undercover tension on the casino floor to a high-stakes confrontation in a dim hallway, each scene crackles with danger and intrigue. Want to find out how Melissa uses her fierce combat skills to protect herself and others? Or whether the Iron Cobras will retaliate in an even bigger way? Then stay tuned and follow the whole story from beginning to end. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Support our channel so we can continue bringing you gripping, action-packed stories like this one. Melissa James had never thought she would end up serving cocktails in Atlantic City. She had arrived in this bustling hub of casinos and neon lights a few years earlier, escaping the echoes of her old life in law enforcement. Tonight, as she stood behind the lavish roulette table at the Sunrise Atlantic Casino, she felt for a moment at peace with the normalcy of her work. On the surface, she was just another waitress in a crisp black uniform, calmly taking orders from tourists dazzled by the slot machines. Few people suspected that beneath her polite smile lay the reflexes and discipline of a former SWAT officer. In the corner of the casino floor, a small group of gamblers cheered as someone hit a modest jackpot on a slot machine. The chatter of chips and the hum of conversation formed a comforting backdrop to her shift. She glided between tables, smiling at patrons, skillfully balancing trays of drinks. The generous tips paid her rent and let her keep a low profile in a city full of swirling lights and constant music. It was a decent cover, and she thought she could settle into this routine for quite a while, perhaps forever. Yet on that particular evening, a ripple of tension cut through the usual buzz of excitement. Melissa noticed it first when the security guards exchanged uneasy looks near the entrance. The cause soon became clear. A biker gang known as the Iron Cobras strode in. They appeared out of place with their leather vests emblazoned by a striking serpent logo. Clearly, they weren't typical gamblers in search of a casual night out. Rather, they surveyed the casino floor like predators on the hunt. Melissa had heard about them. Rumors floated around about how the Iron Cobras had taken over a chunk of the city's outskirts, collecting debts from local businesses. People whispered they were rough enforcers, rumored to be involved in smuggling and other shady dealings. Casinos rarely welcomed such brazen trouble, but the Iron Cobras held enough intimidation power that even bouncers stayed cautious. At first, Melissa tried to dismiss her worries. The group hadn't done more than stride around, making a show of themselves. Yet she sensed an undercurrent of fear. The pit boss watched them carefully from behind the roulette tables. A couple of them demanded drinks from the bar, paying in crumpled bills they tossed onto the counter. Their presence alone was enough to unnerve other patrons. From a distance, Melissa studied them. Her old instincts kicked in. She noted the confident swagger, the way they kept scanning the environment. Each man in the gang carried that same watchful look that told her they were used to brawls. Something about the leader's cold, narrowed eyes set off a familiar alarm in her mind. You never truly leave SWAT training behind. It transforms how you read situations, how you breathe, how you prepare for the worst. Suddenly, the lead biker's gaze landed on her. She saw a flicker of arrogance there. Though she quickly resumed her demure waitress persona, something told her their presence was not a coincidence. Tonight might not end quietly, and she needed to be ready for whatever came next. The heavy odor of leather and stale cigarette smoke trailed behind the Iron Cobras as they moved deeper into the casino. Melissa could practically feel their presence rippling through the staff. Several dealers became visibly tense. The uniformed security guards shifted in their spots, their hands hovering near the radios clipped to their belts. A hush briefly settled over the section of slot machines where the bikers now loitered. Despite the tension, the gang initially seemed content with playing a round of blackjack, placing small bets as though testing the waters. Their conversation was low and gruff, interspersed with mean-spirited laughter whenever one of them pulled a winning hand. Melissa busied herself clearing an adjacent table, trying to stay in earshot to pick up any clues about their intentions. She knew from experience that analyzing enemy behavior was half the battle. If she had advanced warning, she'd know how to react. Eventually, the leader flicked his gaze around the room again. He was a tall, broad man in his late 30s, with a beard that brushed his chest and a scar slicing down his left eyebrow. Every movement he made exuded territorial dominance. Slamming a palm onto the blackjack table, he barked an order for more drinks. The startled bartender nearly dropped a glass in the process. Through it all, the pit boss whispered urgent instructions to the security team. Don't provoke them. Keep an eye, but let them be unless they start real trouble. Melissa's manager, a wiry man named Daryl, approached from behind and spoke to her in a hushed tone. Melissa, just keep your distance. I don't want them zeroing in on any of the staff. Let security handle this if it turns ugly. She nodded, but her instincts argued otherwise. Sometimes in the face of violent men, passivity is the spark that ignites chaos. Still, she accepted Daryl's advice and pretended to keep her focus on a pair of tourists who were requesting refills. The moment she stepped away to bring them fresh drinks, a loud commotion erupted near the blackjack table. Turning swiftly, she saw the tall leader gripping a dealer by the collar. He was snarling in the man's face, accusing him of rigged dealing because he had lost a couple of hands. The sight of a trembling dealer in the biker's grasp sent a shot of adrenaline rushing through Melissa's veins. She forced herself to remain outwardly composed, but inside, her tactical mind was already calculating possible actions. A quick disarm, a restraining hold, or maybe a strategic distraction. Then, almost as soon as it began, the leader let go. He shoved the dealer aside with a bark of laughter, and the rest of the Iron Cobras joined in. They left a scattering of chips on the table and prowled across the casino floor. Melissa quietly breathed out, bracing for the next flashpoint. They were testing boundaries, seeing how far they could push before someone snapped. Her heart pounded. Old habits whispered that she should do recon, figure out if they had weapons on them. But she merely watched from behind her tray, waiting. Tonight was not the night to reveal her past. Not yet. The Iron Cobras advanced like a storm system moving inland, every bit as ominous as the thunder clouds that sometimes rolled across the Atlantic coastline. Patrons began eyeing them warily. An older couple abandoned their slot machine altogether, muttering about dangerous hooligans under their breath. Melissa felt pangs of sympathy for the frightened guests. The entire atmosphere of the casino was shifting from playful excitement into a tense waiting game. As the group sauntered on, a fresh wave of staff members scattered to avoid them. One of the bikers reached out and brazenly groped a waitress passing by, eliciting a shocked yelp. The unfortunate young woman managed to slip from his grasp, while a fellow server ushered her away. When the poor girl's eyes locked with Melissa's, they were brimming with tears and fear. Melissa clenched her jaw. Memories of missions flashed in her mind. Battered victims needing rescue. The moral duty to intervene. She forced herself to breathe steadily. Although two security guards had stepped closer, the bikers offered them only mocking smiles. Clearly, the gang recognized that ordinary security posed no real threat. The difference in numbers alone was daunting. 8 men in menacing black leather, each wearing expressions that dared the staff to stand against them. Melissa had once faced armed criminals, so this was nothing new to her, but she felt the tension of those around her. The staff and guests felt powerless. Picking up a tray of drinks, she moved across the floor methodically. Beneath her calm facade, her muscles buzzed with readiness. She made mental notes. Which corners had cameras? What objects could be used as improvised shields? The most likely escape route for terrified civilians if a confrontation broke out. The gambler in her recognized it as placing side bets against the possibility of chaos. She had nearly reached a pair of young visitors who needed more beverages when the gang's leader swiveled and zeroed in on her. His stare was intense, a predator's curiosity. Leisurely, he sauntered her way. The other bikers, sensing their alpha had chosen a new target, halted as well. The entire group fixed their attention on Melissa. Her pulse quickened, but she pretended not to notice, deftly handing cocktails to the young couple. "Hey, sweetheart," the leader's rough voice boomed. "Got something special on that tray for me?" He curled a grin that was meant to be intimidating, an open challenge for her to show fear. She exhaled slowly, turned around, and regarded him with the professional courtesy of a waitress. "Can I help you with anything, sir?" Her voice was steady, the epitome of polite service. Even so, a nerve twitched in her chest. He chuckled darkly. "Feisty one, aren't you?" he said, ignoring her question. He took a step closer, forcing her to look up at his heavily lined face. His buddies formed a semicircle behind him, all wearing smug grins. "I want a round of beers for my men. Now. And maybe later, you join us for a little private party?" There was no mistake in his tone. It was a threat disguised as an invitation. Melissa gripped her tray tighter. If he expected her to cower, he would be sorely disappointed. Still, she bit her lip. A confrontation right here could put innocent people at risk. Summoning the persona of a meek server, she gave him a nod and started to turn away, hoping to defuse the situation without exposing her well-guarded SWAT background. Melissa carried the tray back toward the bar, each step measured, her mind racing through potential contingencies. She sensed the gang leader's eyes on her the entire way. Though she feigned a calm demeanor, inside she was wrestling with the memory of how quickly violence can escalate once lines are crossed. The biker had all but announced his willingness to intimidate or harass her, and there was no guarantee he would settle for just that. At the bar, she set the tray down with a trembling breath. Marco, the bartender, raised an eyebrow. "You all right, Mel? You look like you've seen a ghost." She tried for a reassuring smile. "I'm okay. They just want beers. 8 bottles. I guess they plan to hang around a bit longer." He began lining up bottles on the counter, shooting uneasy glances at the bikers. "Take care. They're giving me a bad feeling." "Me too," she admitted softly. After collecting the drinks, she debated whether to bring them directly or place them on a side counter for someone else to deliver. But not wanting to risk the younger waitresses or staff, she took a fortifying breath and decided to handle it herself. As she returned, the gang parted to let her through, their tough expressions hungry for intimidation. The leader nodded in approval when she brought the beers to a nearby table. He reached out and deliberately brushed his fingers against her wrist when she set a bottle in front of him, a smug half-smile crossing his face. "You look tougher than these other girls," he commented, leaning closer so she could smell the tobacco on his breath. "Got a name?" "Melissa," she replied evenly, stepping back to reclaim her personal space. She knew better than to volunteer anything more. "Melissa," he repeated, rolling the name around his mouth like he was tasting it. "I'm Crusher." He pointed at the other men. "This is Bones, Dagger, Rocco, and the rest. We're Iron Cobras, sweetheart. You might have heard of us around this city. We usually get what we want. So if we say we want you to join us for a fun night, you'll find it's in your best interest to oblige." The men chortled, raising their bottles in a mock toast. Around them, the whir of slot machines, the clatter of chips, and the lively conversation of the casino patrons seemed muted by the thick tension. Most people pretended not to notice, focusing on their own activities. But Melissa could feel the staff's nervous attention, each of them hoping to avoid becoming the next target. She swallowed the anger bubbling inside. Threatening a waitress was unacceptable. Threatening her with her background was a terrible miscalculation on Crusher's part. Yet revealing her full strength here and now could spark a brawl that would endanger everyone. She settled on a measured response. "Thanks, but I have a job to do. I'm sure there are other women more interested in your offer." Crusher smirked, clearly unaccustomed to resistance. "We'll see. Sometimes all it takes is a little persuasion." He raised his bottle in her direction and took a long swig, never breaking eye contact. Across the floor, a security guard hovered anxiously, unsure of how to intervene. Melissa gave him a small nod that seemed to say, "Hold off." Then she turned and walked away, her heart pounding in her chest. The night rolled on, the casino's overhead lights casting a persistent glow on the tense scene. The Iron Cobras, emboldened by the lack of direct confrontation, split into smaller groups to explore more of the gaming tables and bars. Occasionally, they would swagger back to check on Crusher, who planted himself at a table near the center of the room, like a king surveying his domain. It was clear their presence was intentional, meant to show dominance and stoke fear. Melissa did her best to continue her rounds, though she no longer felt the sense of relief that usually came with the regular clink of coins and hum of excited gamblers. Instead, every time she passed near Crusher, he tossed her a suggestive remark or a leer. She found it harder and harder to maintain her veneer of calm as the night dragged on. At one point, while delivering a drink to another table, she felt him grab her elbow from behind. "You're not being very welcoming to your new guests, Melissa," he mock-purred, How about you keep me company for a while? She forced her voice to remain steady. I'm busy helping other customers. I can't just sit down. His grip tightened in a silent warning. I think you can make time for a VIP like me. Though she could have executed a swift wrist lock and pinned him to the floor in seconds, she held back. Instead, she twisted free just enough to maintain a show of politeness. Sure, as soon as I finish up. Before he could protest, she slipped away to deal with another table's request. Crusher's voice followed her like a malignant shadow. Don't keep me waiting too long, sweetheart. As she served another round of drinks, Melissa locked eyes with one of the security guards. The guard seemed on the verge of stepping in, but again she gave a subtle shake of her head. It wasn't worth it, yet. She needed a better strategy than a messy open fight on the casino floor. Injuries, lawsuits, property damage. The list of potential disasters was too long. It was better to hold her ground quietly, wait for a moment when bystanders wouldn't get caught in the middle. Still, she couldn't ignore the powder keg building around them. From the corner of her eye, she caught a glimpse of an older woman rummaging in a slot machine for a misplaced dollar token. She appeared oblivious to the undercurrent of dread that had settled over the place. That small moment of normalcy almost made Melissa smile. How life insisted on going on, even in tense situations. She used that to steady herself, reminding herself of her past training. Composure was key. Eventually, she circled back to Crusher's table. He regarded her with hungry eyes. About time, princess, he said in a low growl, patting the seat beside him. Sit. For a moment, she entertained the idea of flipping him to the floor in a single smooth motion. Instead, she forced herself to comply, sliding into the chair. He leaned in, his voice dripping with arrogance. I got a question for you. Why aren't you more scared of us? Seems like these other folks here want to run and hide. But you. He eyed her up and down. You act like you've seen worse. Melissa's heart thudded. She gave a tiny shrug, playing it off. I've got bills to pay, that's all. I'm just trying to get through the night. He let out a rumbling laugh and clinked his beer bottle against hers, though she hadn't taken a drink. Guess we'll see how tough you really are when things get interesting. The hours dragged along, tension mounting. By now, most of the casual gamblers had left, unwilling to risk any drama that might erupt. The remaining guests were either hopelessly addicted to the roulette wheel, genuinely unaware of the hostility in the air, or else curious thrill-seekers who wanted to watch events unfold. The casino's management discreetly locked certain exits to contain potential chaos should matters escalate. Melissa's manager, Daryl, approached her in a back hallway as she set down her empty tray. His eyes held a mix of concern and frustration. I'm sorry I have to ask this, he murmured, but can you clock out early and just take off? These guys have singled you out. Maybe if you're not here, they'll eventually leave. She understood his desire to protect her. However, the thought of leaving other employees to face this threat alone gnawed at her conscience. I can't just abandon everyone. You see how they behave, she replied, shaking her head. They'll find another target. Daryl scrubbed a hand over his tired face. I hate this, but I guess you're right. Security's calling the police, but they said it might be a while before a unit can get here. Apparently something major is going on across town. Melissa nodded grimly. We'll figure something out. I have some training in handling tough situations. She kept it vague, not mentioning her SWAT background. If things get worse, we'll guide the customers to safety. He touched her shoulder lightly. I'm grateful, but please be careful, okay? Moments later, she found herself near one of the maintenance rooms, scanning the area for anything that could serve as a defensive tool. A hardened mop handle, maybe a fire extinguisher. She hoped it wouldn't come to that, but old instincts refused to lie dormant. Mentally, she began mapping out an exit plan for the staff, identifying which hallways led to safer spots. Then her phone buzzed in her pocket. A quick check revealed a text from an old friend from her SWAT days, Rodriguez. They hadn't spoken in months, yet he'd occasionally check in to see how she was doing. Melissa typed a hasty message. Might be in trouble. Biker gang at my workplace. Feeling cornered. She didn't expect an immediate reply, but just sending it felt like calling upon a distant ally. Returning to the casino floor, she found the Iron Cobras gathered by the bar. They appeared to be conferring among themselves, occasionally throwing glances her way. Crusher's expression was especially dark. He gestured to her sharply, a silent summons. With the eyes of staff and lingering patrons on her, Melissa walked to them. Crusher spoke in a low, aggressive tone. "We're taking a little trip to the back. You're coming with us. We got some business to settle without all these prying eyes." The color drained from a nearby bartender's face. He started to say something, but his words died under Crusher's intense glare. Melissa understood the danger perfectly. If she refused, the gang might lash out violently on the spot. But going with them could be worse. She weighed her options in a split second. Her best chance was to control the environment somehow. Calmly, she nodded. "All right, let's go." Her heart hammered, but her gaze was steady. She cast a last look over her shoulder, hoping the staff would take the hint and move people away from potential crossfire. Then she steeled herself, stepping toward the private corridor that led to the loading docks and storage rooms. If the Iron Cobras planned to corner her there, they were in for a surprise. She was done waiting. If forced, she would reveal exactly what kind of training she possessed. They led her down a dim hallway, typically reserved for deliveries and maintenance staff. The overhead fluorescent lights flickered, casting harsh shadows on the cinder block walls. Metal shelving units lined the passage, stacked with cleaning supplies and crates of unopened liquor. Melissa could feel the adrenaline pumping through her veins as the Iron Cobras closed around her, forming a menacing semicircle. Crusher stalked forward, towering over her. "You think you're better than us, don't you?" he growled, shoving a finger at her chest. "Walking around with that cool face, acting like we don't scare you." Melissa refused to flinch. Her posture was composed, even as her mind cataloged the nearest potential weapons. Broom handles, a folding chair, the corner of a metal shelf. Years of SWAT operations had taught her to scan every inch of her environment. She noticed that although the bikers were physically intimidating, they didn't appear to be armed with firearms, so far. At least none were visible, but concealed weapons remained a risk. Crusher cracked his knuckles, glancing back at his men. "Nobody in this place has the guts to stand up to the Iron Cobras. We run the streets around here, so we can definitely run a fancy casino. And you—" He leaned in, his voice dripping with contempt. "You're either too stupid or too tough to be scared. Which is it?" She took a slow breath. "I'm just doing my job. Let's keep this calm. There's no need for violence." "Ha!" One of the bikers, Dagger perhaps, let out a mocking laugh. "This little waitress wants to keep it calm. That's hilarious, boss." Another chimed in. "Maybe we teach her a lesson about who's in charge." He pounded a fist into his open palm, producing a dull thud that reverberated along the walls. Crusher's cruel eyes glinted. "That's exactly what I'm thinking." He reached out to grab Melissa's wrist. She snapped her arm out of his grip in one fluid move, surprising him, his brow furrowed in anger. A tense hush fell, each side evaluating the other. Melissa's heart felt like it might burst from her rib cage, but her training kept her steady. "I don't want trouble," she said quietly, "but I will defend myself if I have to." For a moment, Crusher looked genuinely confused, as if the notion of a mere waitress resisting him was absurd. Then his lips twisted into a grin that said he was done playing around. "You want to defend yourself? Fine. Show me." The nearest biker lunged at her, aiming to clamp her arms to her sides. Melissa sidestepped gracefully, hooking her foot behind his ankle and sending him sprawling onto the concrete floor. Before the others could fully register what had happened, she pivoted to face another attacker rushing in from her left. With a swift jab, she struck the nerve cluster under his collarbone, causing him to gasp and stagger backwards. Her moves were crisp, economical. Classic close-quarters combat techniques drilled into her over countless hours of SWAT training. Breath hissed between Crusher's teeth. "What the? She's—" He didn't finish his sentence before one of his men shouted in pain, hitting the floor with a metallic clank against a rolling cart. Rage flashed in Crusher's eyes as he realized that they weren't dealing with an ordinary casino waitress after all. Chaos erupted in the narrow corridor. The Iron Cobras converged on Melissa with fists raised and curses flying. She moved with practiced precision, every muscle memory honed from years of tactical drills. Two more bikers swung at her. She ducked, blocking with her forearm and retaliating with a sharp elbow to one man's solar plexus. He crumpled, wheezing. Simultaneously, she hooked the other attacker's wrist, twisting until he cried out, and dropped to one knee in pain. A well-aimed kick sent him tumbling into a stack of boxes. The clang of metal and the crash of tumbling supplies reverberated like thunder in the tight space. Crusher stood back momentarily, his eyes darting between the scattered bodies of his men and the wiry woman who stood unscathed. He clearly hadn't expected such fierce resistance. "Don't just stand there, get her!" he roared, spurring the remaining bikers into action. Three of them charged in unison, fists and feet lashing out. But Melissa had spent her life perfecting how to handle overwhelming force. She sidestepped one attacker, using his momentum to topple him into another. The third landed a glancing blow across her shoulder, but she grit her teeth, locked his arm, and flipped him onto his back. Her hair had come loose from its neat bun, and her breathing was heavy, but her eyes held a deadly focus. Outside the corridor, staff and a few lingering patrons heard the commotion. Alarmed voices grew louder, and someone yelled for security. The hallway's security camera blinked, capturing everything in stark footage. Melissa knew she'd have explaining to do, but survival took priority. The alternative, allowing the bikers free rein to terrorize, was unacceptable. Crusher finally stepped forward, pulling a switchblade from his belt. With a flick, the blade glimmered under the fluorescent light. "I don't know where you learned to fight like that," he hissed, "but you just made the worst mistake of your life." A hush fell as Melissa faced him, her muscles coiled. She recognized the shift in threat level. Her training taught her how to disarm knife-wielding attackers. She adjusted her stance, hands raised, eyes locked on the blade. "I told you," she said, her voice measured. "I don't want to hurt anyone, but I will stop you if you keep pushing." His lips peeled back in a savage grin. "Funny, I was about to say the same thing to you." He lunged, slashing in a wide arc. Melissa pivoted, letting the blade pass dangerously close, and struck him hard on the wrist. He grunted, but held on to his weapon. A second slash forced her to weave backward. She countered by deflecting his arm and driving a knee toward his abdomen. But Crusher twisted away, proving he wasn't entirely without skill. His men, some nursing bruises, rallied behind him with renewed aggression. Bones, sporting a split lip, snarled, "Slice her good, Crusher." The metallic scent of fear and tension thickened the air, stinging Melissa's lungs. She needed to end this quickly. With a burst of speed, she feinted to the left, drawing Crusher's slash to where she appeared vulnerable. As he committed to the strike, she pivoted right, grabbed his forearm, and slammed it against the edge of a metal shelf. The blade clattered to the floor. Before he could yank his arm free, she delivered a stunning blow to his temple with her elbow. Crusher staggered, eyes unfocused. Rage curdled into shock. Melissa's chest rose and fell with exertion. The last thing she wanted was to kill him. She just needed to put an end to the fight. But a quiet dread told her the Iron Cobras wouldn't give up so easily. Crusher sank to one knee, dazed, as his switchblade skittered away across the concrete floor. The few bikers, still standing, gawked at the humiliating sight of their leader on the verge of collapse. Indecision flickered in their eyes. Should they rush to his aid or cut their losses? Melissa seized the moment, stepping back to put distance between herself and the men. Her body hummed with tension, but she kept her voice firm. "It's over," she announced, the authority of her SWAT days unconsciously threading through her tone. "Take your friends and get out. Don't come back." Adding, Bones, battered from a previous tumble, spat blood onto the floor. "We're the Iron Cobras. You don't get to tell us what to do," he snapped, but the bravado felt hollow. His voice wavered. They had rarely, if ever, encountered an opponent who could handle them so decisively. She pointed at Crusher, who was now struggling to regain his feet. "Look at him. You want more of that?" A tense silence stretched until, at last, Rocco muttered an expletive under his breath and went to help Crusher stand. The group begrudgingly gathered the members who were conscious enough to move, shooting Melissa looks of pure hostility as they retreated. One or two cast their eyes downward, clearly more shaken than they wanted to admit. But as the bikers began to shuffle away, Crusher's pride flickered back to life. He shook off Rocco's steadying arm and fixed Melissa with a venomous glare. "This isn't over. You'll regret crossing the Iron Cobras, Waitress," he warned, voice laced with hatred. "You got lucky tonight. Next time you won't be." She said nothing in return, merely holding his gaze. Her posture conveyed that she was ready for anything, her adrenaline still spiking. With a final snarl, Crusher allowed his men to lead him down the corridor, their footsteps echoing on the concrete until they finally disappeared around the corner. Moments later, the hallway filled with the frantic footsteps of security guards, staff, and a handful of curious patrons. They peered around at the damage, tossed boxes, scattered beer bottles, a broken shelf bracket, and the scuff marks of a vicious fight. In the center stood Melissa, hair disheveled and breathing hard. A small cut on her forearm oozed a thin line of blood where a biker's ring or jacket zipper must have grazed her. Yet she stood resolute, shoulders squared, her eyes scanning for any lingering threat. Daryl was among the first to reach her, eyes wide. "Melissa, are you okay?" he panted, gawking at the scene. "Holy hell! Did you do all this?" She exhaled slowly, letting the tension drain from her muscles. "Yeah, I guess I did," she admitted. "They gave me no choice." One of the security guards gaped at her. "How? Where did you learn to fight like that?" Melissa hesitated, glancing at the small crowd. She wasn't sure how much to reveal. The truth about her SWAT training was a private matter, something she'd purposely kept secret. But tonight, that secret had spilled out in a very public way. "I had some training before I came to Atlantic City," she finally said, voice subdued. "I'm sorry if this caused more trouble." Daryl's gaze darted to the battered corridor, then back to her. "Trouble? You probably saved lives. The police just arrived at the front, but those guys took off. We need to talk to the cops and file reports." He paused. "They might come back, Melissa." She nodded, the adrenaline still singing in her veins. "I know. And when they do, we'll be ready." In the aftermath, the Sunrise Atlantic Casino was left buzzing with a cocktail of relief, awe, and apprehension. The police took statements from staff and witnesses, but the Iron Cobras were already gone, leaving behind only the promise of retaliation. Melissa found herself in the uncomfortable spotlight as everyone clamored for details about her combat prowess. A few co-workers speculated that maybe she'd been in the military, while others theorized about martial arts championships. She answered as little as possible, focusing on the cleanup and ensuring no one was seriously hurt. Daryl insisted that Melissa take the rest of the night off. "You look exhausted," he said, ushering her to the staff locker area. "Go home. Get some rest. We'll figure out tomorrow when it comes." "I will," she promised, though she felt too wired to sleep. As she changed out of her uniform, her phone buzzed again. A text from Rodriguez. "I'm in town. Heard about the Cobras. You good?" Relief washed over her. She shot back a quick reply. "Yes, for now. They threatened to come back. Not sure when." After leaving the casino, she stepped into the cool Atlantic City night. Neon lights flickered across the wide streets. The roar of the ocean in the distance was masked by the hum of traffic. She thought about everything that had happened. In her SWAT days, she'd faced armed hostage takers and violent criminals. But somehow this situation felt more personal. Perhaps it was because she'd tried so hard to leave that life behind, only to have trouble come knocking again. Back at her small apartment not far from the boardwalk, she double-checked the locks on her door and windows. Old habits prompted her to scan for exits and vantage points, even inside her own home. She sighed, reflecting on Crusher's parting words. "This isn't over." The Iron Cobras weren't the type to let public humiliation slide. She could almost see them strategizing in some grimy biker bar at this very moment, vowing revenge on the cocky waitress who bested them. Yet she felt no regret about her actions. She had prevented harm to innocent people, refusing to let bullies terrorize the place she worked. She did what was necessary. If that meant revealing some of her past, so be it. She flicked on the television to distract herself, but every crime show or action flick seemed to echo her own reality. Finally, she settled on the local news, half watching headlines scroll by about unrelated robberies and a storm watch. Midnight approached, and she was about to turn off the TV when her phone buzzed again. It was Rodriguez calling, not texting. "Hey," she answered softly, sinking onto the edge of her couch. "You sound tired, Mel." "Listen, I want to help," came his warm, familiar voice. "Got a tip that the Iron Cobras might be stirring up bigger trouble. Word is they have connections in the city's underbelly, not just petty street stuff. You sure you're safe?" "I'm fine," she lied instinctively, then sighed. "But I won't lie to you. They'll probably try something soon. The cops can only do so much." He hesitated. I still have contacts, people who could assist if you need backup. The idea was tempting, but Melissa was wary. She'd escaped her old life, and calling in a SWAT ally risked pulling her right back into that world. Still, Crusher's threat hovered like a dark cloud. "Let me think about it," she said. "I'll see how things look in a day or two." "Thanks, Rodriguez." After hanging up, she gazed out the window at the glittering city, feeling both gratitude and a pang of loneliness. She was on her own again, but at least she had options. Tomorrow the sun would rise, the casino would open its doors, and life would move on. If the Iron Cobras returned to pick a fight, this time she wouldn't be alone in the corridor. This time she'd be even more prepared, ready to show them that a quiet life in Atlantic City was no invitation to be trampled on. Somewhere in the distance, a motorcycle engine revved, echoing through the night. Melissa pressed her lips together in a determined line. Let them come. She wasn't just a waitress, and if the Iron Cobras truly wanted war, they would soon discover that her SWAT training was more than enough to handle anything they threw her way. Looking back on Melissa's extraordinary journey, it's clear that courage, compassion, and a steadfast sense of responsibility can overcome even the darkest threats. By standing up to the Iron Cobras, she not only defended her workplace, but also proved that ordinary individuals carry hidden strengths. With every swift move, Melissa showcased resilience forged from her SWAT days, yet she never lost her empathy for those around her. Her victory sends a powerful message. A single determined person, guided by a good heart, can bring hope to those who feel powerless. Now that this story has reached its conclusion, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you believe the Iron Cobras will stay gone for good, or will they return seeking revenge? Share your ideas in the comments, and let's keep the conversation going. Thank you for listening, and remember to subscribe for more thrilling adventures.